Folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think we're running a little bit late. I apologize. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the May 14th workshop meeting, and after that, we'll go into our action meeting. Let me just start off, and I will ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Before we get started on our agenda, let me thank the staff and my colleagues for 2 or 3 good weeks of meetings around this Commonwealth. We hopscotched to 9 districts, and unfortunately I missed one, which was one of my favorite districts in Fredericksburg, so I apologize, Ms. Sellers, for that. I will make it up to you. I would tell you that it was interesting. We've sort of seen this before in a way, which is particularly off year, we tend to get more participation in the smaller, more rural areas. And we had a lot in a couple places, but it was interesting to move around. We did some things a little bit differently in that we didn't always meet at the headquarters in the district. This year we took Northern Virginia out to Loudon, which hadn't been done before, just to show a little bit of flag out there and see what those folks are talking about. Stanton, we took up to Winchester and so forth and so on. And so it was just good to get around, and appreciate y'all, everything that you did to help us in each of those districts, and particularly the staffs. Steve here, both at the central office, and Jennifer here. All your folks have been great. But also out in the districts themselves. So I thought it was a good travels around the Commonwealth, and it's always good to do that. Appreciate all your help. So with that, I'm going to launch into our first documented agenda item, which is the FY 2025 Urban and Arlington Henrico Street Maintenance Payments. Good morning, Ms. Farmer. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr.
Hope you're
Secretary. Well. I am. I hope you are as well.
Thank you.
Members of the board, good morning. Russ Dudley every May gives you a primer on the city and 2 counties' maintenance payments for approval in June. And this year I wanted to provide a primer for that to further explain the supplemental money we've been providing to our maintenance program areas over the last couple of years and our recommendation for 2025. So since fiscal year 2023, the cost of paving has increased significantly as experienced by the department. Our paving program has grown to also meet the performance targets that this board adopted a couple of years ago, and continues to receive updates as to how we're doing with regard to our performance of our pavements. Beginning in that year, additional special funds above the base maintenance allocation have been provided to the maintenance program to support those additional needs. We provided supplemental amounts due to the uncertainty of the long-term cost implications and whether it would continue at the sustained levels, that those levels would be sustained over time. And so as those supplemental funds, we have not embedded those into the base to drive the future base budget allocations. We also provided supplemental funds in 2024, and we have a recommendation for the upcoming fiscal year. We presented a draft in January, and now we have an updated allocation assumption for 2025. This slide provides a summary of those recommendations. Back in January and then in April, I continued that VDOT's recommendation was $120 million for fiscal year 2025. We are updating that recommendation based on the final contract assumptions as well as our calendar year 2025 paving season, with a recommendation of $202.5 million for VDOT maintenance allocations. This table on this slide summarizes how those locality amounts are proportionally distributed based on the size of the recommendation for the department. And so in +23, we provided some supplemental funding for fuel operations as we were seeing spikes in fuel prices for the agency, as well as our paving experience. And then you can see the proportional distribution to cities and the 2 counties that maintain their own roads. In 2024, we came before you with a recommendation to support paving of $77 million and a $70 million one-time allocation to help with our ordinary maintenance items for a total of $147 million. And then the proportional shares for cities and counties. This year, based on what we've seen with our paving information, our recommendation is $202.5 million for 2025 and the corresponding adjustments for the localities.
Ms. Farmer, can you be clear to the group about the 147 and its components versus the 90 and the 202? So what I'm trying to get at is, as you indicated in your comments, because we should be looking at this and seeing what's happening, right, and what's going on here. That's what we're trying to demonstrate to you. The 147 was a combination, as Ms. Farmer said, of some paving money, but also some one-time maintenance money that was not paving, if you will, right? And so what I'm getting at, Laura, the 90 was all paving,
Yes,
right? Mm-hmm. The 147 was 70 and 77, 70 being paving. Or was it the other way around?
77 was paving.
Paving and 70 were other items, right? So don't necessarily compare on an apples-to-apples basis 147 to 90 in terms of paving. And then 202 is all paving.
Yes, sir.
So really, as you look at this in terms of paving, what I wanted to bring to your attention is it was 90, then it was 77, then it was 202. And that's the amounts that we're kicking in additional because of what she said earlier, which was a combination of our increasing targets, et cetera. Okay, is that fair enough? I want them to see the progression in terms of the paving itself versus the other things as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Question on that, Ms. Secretary.
Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, that's helpful. So does that mean that that's pure inflation for the cost per mile, or is this, we're going to have?
No, let me speak. She indicated that early, but when we haven't broken that out here, Mr. Merrill, it's a great question. So we increased our, let's start with the concept of, we say maintenance is first, right? So we need to maintain what we build. And what does that mean, right? What does maintaining it mean? And so we've had targets for bridges, we've had targets for paving, we've had targets for ditching, we've had targets for all sorts of things, right? And we've changed those targets over time, set and changed them. And as we changed them over the last couple years, we've ratcheted them up. And we've said we want to have to get to that target, right? And so we've got that. So we're chasing we're chasing a higher target, Mr. Merrill. And the underlying cost of the unit costs are going up at the same time. So it's a combination of volume and unit price, both driving these numbers. And it was interesting, last night I was looking at a documentary on the Vanderbilts and how they built all these incredible houses. And the only one that was sustained was the one in Biltmore because they ran out of money, basically. They spent a lot of money on construction and infrastructure. And then as their funds started going down, their income started going down, they couldn't maintain them. So they sold them, right? And the only one left was the Biltmore. But it just made me think about, as we try to balance construction and the needs to update and to improve our infrastructure, that always comes with a continuing and ongoing cost. And that continuing ongoing cost is rising fast on a unit basis. And as we push our targets, it's really pushing us. And so at the end of the day, what we will do eventually this year, in the next numbers of months, we're going to go a little bit deeper dive into this and sort of see where this leads us, right? Because we all know where it leads us. If you keep going like this, you end up with no construction and it's all maintenance. And so later part of the summer, early part of the fall, we'll dig into this fairly deeply to try to get a handle on where this is in 6 and 7, 8 years and what we need to do about it now, or start to do about it now to address it. So bottom line is, as we go through this, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, but we've got increasing targets, we've got increasing unit costs, and that's going to take more money out of everything else we do. And we can reduce our targets. We can't change the unit cost very easily. And obviously, some of this, as we do construction, because some of our construction is asphalt paving and so forth, we're probably driving some of this ourselves. We're probably driving some of this inflation, just like anything else that you've seen in our society. If you throw a bunch of money at something, you're going to drive inflation. That's what's going to happen. That's economics. So we're a little bit, we're trying to decouple in terms of our projection what it might look like in 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years as this starts to slow down and as things change. But at the end of the day, we're eating more of the construction as maintenance costs go up. That's our trade-off. That's what we deal with every day.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hines.
I'm really glad to hear that you guys are going to do a deeper dive on this. I think it's really important because the last point that you mentioned, which is we're adding lane miles, significant lane miles every year, is one I think that is really important. And I've talked about this before. The amount of lane miles that are being added because of the regional entities is really an important thing to keep one's eyes on.
That's a great point.
And because right now, the way those entities are authorized by the General Assembly, they can only build expansion. They have no role in maintenance. And I've been very worried about this for a number of years, that we don't have our arms around. And I'm watching as MBTA in particular is getting ready to send some big projects out the door so that what they're funding in terms of lane miles in Northern Virginia is going to become quite significant. So I do think y'all need to I think the deeper dive is really appropriate, and I would urge you to sort between what's in VDOT right away versus, and VDOT's constructing it versus what's coming through the regions.
That's a fantastic point. And if you think about an easy project to look at that's huge is the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project, right? And we're going to double that bridge tunnel. We're going to add all these express lanes. We're going to do all this stuff, right? And 92%, I think is the number still, is being funded out of the region, right? And so that revenue stream never gets to maintenance. And it's a huge revenue. You add the 3 regional, and we've seen this before in our financial data, but you add the revenue that comes from the regional authorities, and it all pumps into construction, and we got to cut the grass, right? And our revenue stream didn't change, and they'd keep building and building and building and building and building, and we got to still cut the grass. And so it's a real issue, and obviously the impact of that is just starting to be seen because these authorities haven't existed but for so long. But that may be something we need to think about as well in terms of what they're.
Mr. Secretary, I have one other thing I just would like to say in relation to this. Last year, some of that supplemental funding that was not for paving was for things like sound walls. And sound walls are a thing that we don't have a pot for. They're a federal requirement. I can tell you the ones in Nova that did get attention were ones that literally it was like looking through Swiss cheese. They were so bad. I just think the Commonwealth can't afford from a long-term strategy to not have a game plan about sound walls and replacing them. And we have some of the oldest ones in Northern Virginia, so we're the tip of the iceberg, as so often happens. But I really wish there was some piece of this that could be used for sound walls up in Nova, because we have a lot that still really need attention. So I just put that out there too. Other people are 10, 12 years behind us in terms of the wear and tear.
Thank you. Ms. Stamp.
Just a quick point. I can tell you that with the new bridge tunnel that we have at the Hampton Roads, maintaining tunnels and trestles over salt water is an unbelievably expensive proposition. So, I mean, that's serious money. So this deep dive is really important.
And, Mr. Stamp, Ms. Hines, and the rest of you all, you know that the maintenance needed in the very beginning is not like the maintenance needed in 10 years, right? I mean, it's like a new house, right? So like that debt is coming, right? And we need to be ahead of it. So you all made great points. I appreciate it. Ms. Farmer.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes,
if I
Mr.
might,
Mr. Commissioner.
before we get back to Laura's presentation, particularly on this slide, I'd like to call attention to the last line that she has above the table that indicates the locality amounts are proportionally distributed based upon the base allocation. And I think this is going to be something very important as Russ starts talking about this, that as we have taken a look at the supplemental funding for whether it be ordinary maintenance or the paving program overall, we thought it was a blip. You know, the cost of the commodities, fuel costs, and other things. We did this. We've been back 3 times now because we thought maybe inflation was going to settle back out. Other things were going to take place. Commodity prices would normalize. What we've seen out of the last 3 fiscal years is that it's not normal. It's not normalized back to where we saw it. So we're going to need, as part of this work over the summer, is to take a look at what the base allocation needs to be, rather than coming back to you at mid-cycle or even at the end of the year and say that we need an infusion of cash back into the maintenance program to be able to meet these targets. So that is also the work, Mr. Secretary, that we've talked about getting that base allocation reset now that we know that what the lay of the land is with commodities and fuel and the volatility that exists today.
More to come. Ms. Farmer.
Yes, sir. So since my April presentation, the department has fielded a couple of questions from localities about the base maintenance program for VDOT compared to the allocation distribution for cities. And so I felt it important to highlight some components of VDOT's maintenance program that exist solely because of what the department does. So it does have a base program allocation that supports the core program. It grows annually by the change in the CPI projection that we get from the Department of Taxation in the fall of each year. It's the same with the base allocation for the cities and the 2 counties. We also have special allocations within the program that are driven by dedicated revenue sources. So when the department experiences property damage, we bill those folks who are responsible for that damage and attempt to recoup the expense of replacing guardrail and other things that happen to our infrastructure. We also have a revenue program called Integrated Directional Signage. You're probably aware of that on the roads, that we have a revenue stream from those businesses that help defray the cost of that program. Outdoor advertising, as well as vending commissions at our interstate rest areas. And so there's some components that are self-funded within the allocation within the program. And separately, we have our maintenance management and direction, which serves as an administrative function of the program, and it grows each year by the other components of administrative programs within the department. We have a breakout of both personal services, which includes the salary and benefits of the staff, as well as non-personal. And so that is a fraction of the staff within the department, but it is a separate component of the overall allocation for VDOT.
Ms. Farmer, let me add this in too. Over the last couple years, we've had some real numbers that have come through our budget directed by the General Assembly and the governor. All those things are hitting us in a big way, right? When you have 5%, 5%, 5%, all the personnel that work in this arena are part of this cost. And so if your salary costs, your personnel costs are going up, it's all embedded in this, right? So we got the unit costs in the paving, we got salary internal personnel costs going up at a fairly high rate, and then we have more of it to do. So all those things are coming together to impact us, and it impacts everybody. But at the end of the day, as we're chasing a higher number to fund, that also then sends a higher number to the localities, and appropriately so, off the base. And there's been a little bit of confusion about how it gets calculated. I've talked to some folks that were concerned that we that we were not following what we're supposed to follow. I can assure you that we will follow the law. We will do exactly what the code tells us to do. But there's some numbers in ours that aren't in the base of everybody else, and sometimes it gets a little confusing. So we'll work with that with our partners. We'll work through that. But at the end of the day, all those things are coming together, and it's creating some real difficulty in terms of maintenance costs going up substantially. Ms. Sellers.
This is going to be a really dumb question, but when you look at these base programs, is this done by a county and city? Is this done at the county and city level, and then at the residency level, and then at the district level? How is this organized, I guess, is the...
Commissioner, how do we calculate, is it calculated by city and county entity? The answer is yes.
And what I'm trying to understand is when I look at like an allocation and you start to look at and ask questions of where can you maybe, where can we look throughout the Commonwealth to see, are there opportunities for expansion? Like there are some counties that aren't growing at the same rates as other counties. So maybe there'll be a little bit more static, where you can look at a Stafford
It's
spots that
variable,
are
Ms. Sellers.
growing.
The commissioner will explain how it works.
So I think the easy one to hit would be our pavements and bridges that have defined targets, and those are dependent upon the sufficiency of the bridge rating or the sufficiency of the pavement, and that's independent of the size of the county. The number of pipes, the lane miles of ditching operations that would need to be had are dependent upon the number of miles that are in the respective county.
So the lane miles kind of got to the question I was asking. Do we look
Some
at it by
cases.
counties? Okay. So
Each county would have, each county and each one has their own number,
Okay,
and it's a formula,
okay.
right? And it looks at lots of different things, but one of them is about, the pavement target. If their pavement was perfect, right, 100% perfect, and our target was 70%, it would be a different impact to them. They wouldn't have any need for any, right? So it depends on where they are, the condition. It's the condition and then the amount that drives the number. Does that make sense?
So it does vary by district based upon the size of the program or the lane miles that the.
Basically need-based is what we're trying to do, right?
Getting there.
That's where we're heading. We'll help, we'll
Mr.
work with
Secretary.
you some more.
Can I just clarify a little
Please.
bit of that?
Yeah,
So
help me out here, Ms. Sellers.
the base allocation is financially driven in terms of a program was established well before my career with the department began, and it grows by this rate that we set based on feedback we have. We used to have a producer's price index. We've shifted to CPI when that was available. And so the allocation, in terms of what determines what the base allocation is really just math. And so within that allocation, we distribute funding based on performance targets and needs across the state. And so as we come back and ask for additional resources, it means that what we have in the base isn't cutting it for paving in this case.
And you look across the Commonwealth, or are we looking,
So let me help. As Ms. Farmer said, initially there was a base allocation for cities and counties, okay? That number was static, and then it's been changed, and it gets changed over time by how much the state's changes. So if the state goes up 10%, they go up 10%. Now, that's the money for them, right? They got that money. Now, how do you distribute that money? Goes back to the targets. So the underlying base is driven by the increase in our budget and the original base that was set. How it's distributed is based on their needs, given the amount of money that we have. And as we don't have enough money at the state level, then we take some out of construction, we give it to us. When we give it to us, we need to give them their corresponding share, so they get the same thing. That's generally how it works. Thank you, Ms. Sellers.
So the total VDOT allocation is driven by that growth rate as determined, and we distribute based on needs. When Russ comes up, he will talk to you about, once that program value is set, then he determines the per mile distribution to cities in the 2 counties. So that will come later in today's presentation. So I also wanted to note the makeup of the financial assistance to the cities and compare it to the current fiscal year. And so the first line is the base budget allocation for cities, from $448.2 million in the current year to $462.0. This has a correction from the April assumptions I came to you with, just a quality control error within formulas. And so it's been updated. In addition, when we considered the omnibus bill in 2020, there was presented an implementation plan where we would provide supplemental funding to the cities, and that is outlined by the second row. Back in, I believe, the 2022 session, the General Assembly directed $15 million in 23 and 24 to the cities. We have considered that a biennial action and one time only, so it does not continue in 2025. The next row highlights that supplemental funding that I went through in the earlier slides, $37.5 million in 24 and a recommended $52.2 million in the current recommendation for 2025. We also provide, as directed by, I believe, the Appropriation Act, $1 million a year to localities that host port facilities. And there's a determination as to how those funds are distributed across the 4 localities. Russ will also mention that later. And then about 10 or 12 years ago, we were given an overweight permit revenue function where for each permit that's distributed, the fee is $130. 120 of that gets to go to the Highway Maintenance and Operating Fund, and we have to distribute it according to lane mileage between VDOT, the cities, and the counties. And so this represents the city's share of that. We reconcile it each year based on actuals, and so it does vary year to year because of performance in the previous 12 months.
Question. Mr. Chairman's busy.
Sorry,
No worries.
Mr. Davis.
The Appropriation Act, the $15 million that's not recurring in 2025, that $15 million is spread across all cities?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All cities in the Commonwealth. Okay, very good.
So there was
The total.
and there was an amount in 23, was there not? So there's one in 23, one in 24, that goes away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Please continue.
So, and then for Henrico and Arlington County, who maintain their own roads, the same base correction exists for 25. We're at $82.1 million for the recommendation. The supplemental funds I mentioned earlier are recommended at $9.3 million in 2025, and their exempt permit revenue distribution falls to $17,000. And so just rounding, they do get a share. It's just small in fiscal year 25. So the recommendation of $91.4 million. Unless you have any additional questions, I would turn it over to Russ Dudley to walk through the determination of the per mile rates for the localities.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Mr. Dudley, welcome. Good morning. Hope you're well.
I'm doing well. How's everybody?
Great, thank you.
So Laura's got the complicated stuff. I got the easy stuff. As Laura's mentioned, I'm going to talk about the urban and Arlington Henrico city payment rates, payments to their to supplement their street maintenance. Urban roads that receive maintenance payments have to first meet certain criteria, and that criteria is specifically written out in the code. Maintenance payments are made to all cities and towns, or all cities and towns with populations over 3,500, and then certain towns that are listed in the code. So those are very specific towns. They may not have populations of 3,500, but they've been listed in the code as receiving, eligible to receive maintenance payments. Each year, these localities are required to submit us any additions and deletions to their inventories, and we use those inventory changes and the budget provided to us to come up with our maintenance payments to the localities. The department also is required to inspect arterial roads, this is by code, of the urban localities annually. And that includes pavement and signage and markings and that sort of thing, and they have to meet standards, our standards for those sort of things. We make payments based on two categories of roads. The principal and arterial roads, so you have one arterial rate, then you have another rate for local and collector streets. So now that I've said those words, I'm going to explain a little bit about what arterial is, collectors is, because I think sometimes maybe not everybody knows this, and we just take for granted that everybody knows what this means. So I'll start off by apologizing to my transportation planner friends out there for this explanation, because they're going to cringe when they hear me say this. But the federal road classification organizes streets and roads into classes or systems depending on their intended use, and that it specifically uses mobility and access as the two primary parameters. So if you look at the chart to the left, you'll see that those roads with the most access and the least mobility are our local roads. These are our local streets in our neighborhoods, just around where you live. These roads then feed collectors, which have a bit more mobility, but a little less access. Those funnel up to your arterial roads, which are your minor and major arterials, which have even more mobility, less access, and higher speeds. And finally, those feed all the way up to your interstates and freeways, which is your most access and your highest speed. So that's on the left. On the right is just an illustration of what it might look like graphically. Any questions on that? So otherwise, if there are, I'll have to get a planner up here to give you any more explanation to that. It's pretty simple. Commissioner Secretary, we had a long discussion about this a while back. So Arlington and Henrico are the only two counties in the state that maintain their local streets. And they also have a maintenance payment program that's very similar to the urban payments, the urban program. Like the payments are made quarterly. I don't think I mentioned that, but they're made quarterly, but they're not based on functional classification. It's just their streets. Arlington gets a rate, Henrico gets a rate. Simple as that.
By code.
Yes, sir. So that's it. There's no requirement for the board to approve the additions or deletions. That's a requirement for the urban localities. And there is no requirement for an annual arterial road inspection in code. So in addition to the maintenance payments, we also provide a few more payments within those, in that process. So these are, first, we distribute the overweight permit fees through this program. And you heard Laura mention that. And that's distributed equally per lane mile across all the localities, including Arlington and Henrico. Then we provide an additional $1 million to the city of Chesapeake to cover the additional cost of their movable bridges. These are drawbridges. I think there's 3 of them in Chesapeake. There used to be 4. They're the only locality in the state that maintains these movable bridges, and we've done this since 2005. And then finally, we distribute $1 million to the 4 localities in the state that have a tax-exempt Port Authority property in their jurisdictions. That's to compensate them from the tax for that. That money is given to them proportionally based on cargo throughput.
Mr. Stant.
Are we good?
Russ, do we have any idea what, you say you give Portsmouth and the other 3 cities $1 million a year. That sounds to be like absolutely nothing compared to what that property would be taxed at if it were.
It's not for taxes, that's just road maintenance associated with where they are. There's some other payments that go to those entities under other programs. It's not huge, Mr. Stant. It's not. I think there's another $1 million, and I may be out of school here, but I think there's another $1 million that goes to each of them, not divided by them, for payments in lieu of taxes for, emergency response and those sorts of things. But it's not a huge number.
And right, just to make sure I wasn't unclear, the $1 million from us is, yes, distributed, it's $1 million for all 4. So it's not, once you get to Warren County, it's not a lot of money, but it is required to be used for the maintenance of the roads.
That 1 million each or 1 million? for-
No,
Million
it's divided.
in total. It is divided between the four. So you're right, it doesn't appear to be a whole lot of money there.
It's all code stuff.
So total budget for and let me go back to this here for a second, just because you're gonna see some numbers that look a little different, but I think I'm gonna make sure this is clear. When you look at these numbers, the overweight permit fees, although they were in Laura's presentation, I don't use them to calculate maintenance payments. They're gonna get that money separately. The Chesapeake money, that is taken off the top before I figure out maintenance payments, because it's given to the city of Chesapeake. And the $1 million for the Port Authority payment is separate from the maintenance payment. So although it's all part of the supplement, part of the urban funding, it's separate from the maintenance payment. So you see in some numbers that won't look exactly the same as yours, and that's why. So when you look at our urban payments or the urban budget this year, we have about $525 million, and that includes the supplemental funding that Laura just went over. And when we account for the inventory changes, so that's in the addition to the roads, to the lane miles that all the urban localities have added, we're going to get a new rate of $29,094 per moving lane mile for arterial roads. And that's up from $28,317 last year. Mr. Kaspowitz?
Could you repeat that?
So for the rates.
The rates, yeah.
So the rates of this year, it's $29,094 per lane mile for principal and for the arterial roads, and that's up from $28,317 last year.
Thank you.
Make clear. And then the locals and collectors going to receive $17,082 per lane mile, some change, and that's up from $16,625 from last year. And they will also receive about $3.79 per lane mile for the overweight permit fees. We recommend to continue the $1 million to Chesapeake to address the additional costs associated with their bridges. And of course, once we know the throughput for the 4 localities, we'll figure out the, how to split the $1 million across those localities.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kaspers.
So, Russ, in looking at that, we make the assumption that the cost of maintaining the principal and the collector roads in both jurisdictions that we're funding is the same?
And so for all urban localities, the cities and towns under this program, arterials get the same rate.
Right. And do we get any pushback on that? I mean, Northern Virginia, I would think, would be the state's most expensive, along with Hampton Roads.
We get pushback about maintenance payments quite often, but this is
Okay.
This is the process that we use. But yeah, I understood. Yeah. Okay, so for Arlington, Henrico, the budget looked a little bit closer because the only thing we pull out of their budget is their overweight permit fee distribution of $70,000. So we've got about $91 million for Arlington and Henrico. They are treated as one budget, so those 2 localities are one budget. This year, once we take into the inventory changes between Arlington and Henrico, and Arlington doesn't have very many inventory changes, very little, they're about built out. Henrico has the inventory changes. So this year, their payments will be $24,662 for Arlington, all of their roads, and $17,945 for Henrico, all of their roads. And that's up from $23,573 for Arlington last year and $17,153 for Henrico last year. And of course, they'll get their $379 per lane mile for the overweight permit fees.
And Russ, to reiterate, their lane miles does not impact the base budget. You've just backed into that number.
Just back into the number. I mean, we back into all these, we back into
Right.
the mileage rates for all these numbers. We get,
Right.
we get the budget and then we back into it based on an initial.
If they go up or down, it's not relevant in terms of how much money they get. It's only relevant to how much it's per lane mile,
Absolutely. They are one budget, these two.
because it's statutorily directed.
The 85 cities and towns are a budget, the 2 counties are a budget. We work like that. Okay, so the next steps, we'll bring a resolution to the board for both the urban inventory, because you do approve their inventory changes, and the payments, and then another resolution approving the payments to Arlington and Henrico. Questions?
right, thank you very much, sir.
I think I'll just stay
You're going
up
to
here.
stay right where you are and talk about TAP program.
Yes, sir. Let me pull this presentation up. All right, so this year, I think everyone here was involved with the TAP selections. And I'm going to provide a very quick overview of the TAP selections to let you know what we all selected. I hope everyone found their participation valuable and interesting. I think we selected a great group of projects this year, and as you may know, you probably know, all these projects are required to get to construction in 4 years. They don't always get there. I'm pretty confident the majority of these are going to get there. These are all really, really good projects. The staff and you guys did a really good job vetting these projects, and really happy with it. So you don't need an overview because I gave a very detailed overview in January of the program, but just to hit on some of the highlights, it is a federal program. It's an 80-20, so localities have a 20% match. It's a biennial program. Individual projects are limited to a maximum of $2.5 million of federal money. And the eligible projects are projects that support non-motorized transportation modes. Typically, they're bicycle and pedestrian facilities like crosswalks, sidewalks, signals, trails, ADA upgrades, and that sort of thing. Anything that supports non-motorized transportation modes. Our applications started in April of 2023. We ended in October of last year. We received 104 applications that were eligible, so we screened in. They were submitted by 57 separate applicants. We had 19 on top of that screened out. So we looked at these pretty closely and make sure all of the applications were eligible, viable. 19 were screened out. We had 4 applications that were subsequently withdrawn by the applicants. And so this total screened in application requests valued they asked for $120 million, and the for projects valued at $229 million. 17 of those projects were existing projects, that the applications were existing, and they were valued at about $18 million. This table breaks down the distribution of the applications we received by district. Nova, of course, had the most, as usual, followed closely by Hampton Roads and Richmond districts. As you know, we have to distribute the funds both by statewide and then by population area, and that gets a little complicated sometime, but the top half of this table provides the funding that was available to the CTB for distribution and the awarded amounts for each population area. So we didn't have enough applications in the areas under 5,000 population and between 50,000 and 200,000 to utilize all the funding. And then we had a little less than $1 million left over after all the CTB board member selections were made. So those extra allocations will go into our balance entry to support projects in need of additional funding for either award or to go to advertisement. MPOs representing population areas over 200,000 also distribute allocations to projects within their geographic areas. The bottom half of the table shows those allocations. Roanoke is going to take 900,000 of those allocations and provide to an existing project separate from the application process. And Fredericksburg did not select any projects this year. They're going to hold on to their funds. And so we put together this little pie chart just to kind of show you where the funds go to, the types of projects where the funds go. You see the preponderance of the funds will go to like trails type projects. These are actual trails or multi-use paths, the large paths that everyone gets to use. It's followed closely by pedestrian improvements, sidewalks, intersection improvements, pedestrian refuse islands, ped lights, walk, not walk type things. And then the 27 million are projects that are associated with schools. So these are projects that the applicants noted were there to support access to schools. So they could be sidewalks, they could be bicycle lanes or whatever, but they're within 2 miles of schools and should support traveling to schools for the students. and a small amount there for the for the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program. We've had quite a bit of conversation about that, too. Our next steps, the project will be added to the SYIP for June's approval, and you will approve that as part of that, the total package. So any questions? I think we've been through a lot of TAP. I think we all know what TAP's all about. Again, we had a great selection process this year. I really appreciate everybody's help.
Mr. Kaspertz.
I missed the April meeting, but based on past experiences and my interactions with Ms. Hines, I just wanted to say we really appreciate the way you administer the program. Your interactive nature and your collaboration are very beneficial, and I think the outcomes reflect that. So thank you for your good work.
Very much appreciate that.
Mr. Kaspertz, if you will allow me, I would suggest to you the outcome was better without you being there than it was when you were there.
One of the reasons I
Because
chose
she
April
was,
for my
she
bike
was a
trip, sir.
she was a dogged representative on your behalf.
Good.
She was absolutely dogged, and you should congratulate her and thank her
Oh, I do,
in the most appropriate way.
profusely.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And the staff does all the work, you know, I just stand up and.
Takes good
stand up
leadership.
and talk. All right, we
All right,
ready
now
for-
this is officially now the Russ Dudley Show.
This is a Russ Dudley show.
All right.
I'll be
Continue,
here, I'll
please,
be here
sir.
every Thursday.
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, but Thursday, you know. All right.
You only get one slot.
Anyway, so you've heard me speak about the revenue sharing program before. I think most of you know a little bit about it. It's a very popular program. So this year, I want to go over the selection process, the application cycle this year. Last year, the board updated some of our revenue sharing policies, so I know most of you have heard about this. Again, I've said it's a very popular program with our localities in that they generally use this program to support projects that are of local importance, and sometimes as an alternative to the Smart Scale funding program. This slide provides an overview of, if I can get to it, of the program. It is a state program, which what makes it very popular. So it doesn't have all the federal strings, federal processes, all that sort of stuff. It's a 50-50 match. Localities are limited to a $5 million per year request because it's a biennial cycle. It's $10 million per cycle. Projects are limited to a maximum of a total allocation of $10 million. So it can be a $20 million project, 50-50, but then they can add as much as they want to the project on their own. Projects are, by code, we are required to distribute the funding according to specific priorities. And those are priority one, or the first priority, are given to projects which have already received revenue sharing funding. Priority two are those allocations. Our allocations are provided to those projects which either meet a B-Trans need or accelerate a project that is already in a locality's capital improvement program. So these are new projects. Third, any maintenance project that addresses a deficient pavement or bridge, so the bridge rehabilitation or pavement resurfacing. And then lastly, or any other project which is otherwise eligible, just a transportation project in general, but doesn't meet the first three priorities. So priorities are allocated in full before we move to the next priority. If there's not enough allocation to fully fund the next priority down the line, we have a proration process that we use to provide everyone in that priority funding. And I'll go over the prioritization or the proration process in a second. So the application cycle began just like TAP in April and ended in October. We had 159 eligible applications submitted from 57 separate localities. That is the same as TAP, but not the same localities, which is quite a coincidence. I asked 3 times if that was correct. We had 4 projects that were screened out. Revenue sharing is much easier as far as eligibility, so we don't screen out that many projects. And here we've broken down the request by allocation priority. So you see priority 1s and priority 2s, almost a 50-50 split. Priority 3s, not so many, and then very few priority 2s. Here's a distribution of where the applications came from, the screened-in applications. Again, not again, but Hampton Roads won this race, and then followed by Northern Virginia and then Richmond. So here's where the funding went this year. So Priority 1 projects, we had $210 million to distribute. We have $100 million each year from the budget, but then we had another $10 million from our deallocation process. So this is where the funding went this year. We had $134 million go to Priority 1 projects, so they were all funded at 100%. Priority 2 projects, we had $36,199,000, about 36.2 million funded 26 projects up to $1 million per locality. So this is what happens is we fund all projects in the next priority up to $1 million per locality. This way, the small projects can get fully funded, and the large projects can get some money and move on, get moving, so they can come back next year and ask for the next cycle and ask for more money. So we had 26 projects funded at 100% and 52 projects funded at 42%. So in other words, that's the proration process per each cycle. That way, everybody gets some money in that priority, but the small projects don't get left out with just a little bit of money and not able to do anything.
Secretary?
Mr. Stanton?
Question. Russ, is there some concern that the Priority 1 projects is almost as much as the Priority 2 projects? And is there an investigation of schedule or some way of understanding why we're spending just as much money on projects that were approved in the last cycle as we're spending on new projects in this cycle?
Last cycle it was like 1/3, 2/3. So we had 2/3 Priority 2. So those 2/3 are coming back and getting more money this year, which is increasing the Priority 1. So it's cyclical like that. You'll see a lot of Priority 2s and a few Priority 1s. Those will get done, and then the Priority 2s will pop up and become Priority 1s. When we can fully fund the projects, then we don't get as many Priority 1s, but I don't think this last cycle we have a lot of people coming back and asking for more money. So yeah, it can be cyclical. You'll see this kind of 1 year it'll be a split, the next year it'll be 1/3, 2/3. So the problem with this is you don't get to Priority 3, you don't get to Priority 4 for one, and then you don't fully fund Priority 2 projects, and a lot of localities are a little hesitant of getting projects started if they don't have full funding. And we'll have some localities come back and say, if I can't get it all, I don't want any of it. Sometimes that happens, but we want to get them started. And the way the code is written, you come back the next time and you're Priority 1. So you're likely to get your funding. Help? So this is where the funding went. Again, this is where we allocated everybody. Hampton Roads, of course, received the most money. They had the most applications, followed by Northern Virginia and then Richmond. 55 localities, 151 projects. And here's our pie chart for the types of projects that revenue sharing provides funding for. You see it, they're all over the board. This just represents the importance or the locality important, what they see as important in their jurisdictions. So anywhere from turn lanes to intersection improvements to brand new roads to sidewalks, you get it all. So that's what's really interesting and valuable about this program. You fund whatever's important to you.
Sir, Mr. Merrill.
These results, the proposed allocation that's on your slide 6, have they been communicated? Because I've gotten questions about where some projects are that jurisdictions have.
This
6, where it says 10 projects were proposed for funding at $17 million.
These have all been communicated to our district staff, so they should be in turn communicating to the
Local jurisdiction should hear from.
Yeah, they should know. We've already begun our application, our agreement process. So most of these are locally administered, so we have an agreement process. So they should know. There might just be a hiccup with a couple of folks.
Ms. Sellers?
This is the program that at one point, it was a $10 million cap for the locality, correct? Where revenue sharing, the locality put up $10 million, and it was matched with $10 million, if I'm remembering correctly.
Per project, they cannot get more than $10 million. Per application cycle, they can't ask for more than $10
Well,
million.
that's now, but I know when I was on the board, I believe, because I remember our staff saying we put up $10 million, and then we get $10 million. And then we would put it on different projects throughout the year. And I'm just curious if we've seen, because looking at some of these numbers going to different areas, if that's impacting it, particularly in like the Fredericksburg district, where I know Spotsylvania was very good at putting up the full 10 million annually, and Stafford tried to put up the full $10 million annually and use that on different projects. And I'm just curious how the change from allowing the locality to put 10 million as a locality instead of on a project has changed how the program operates, that nuance.
They're still allowed $10 million worth of request. But they can't ask for more than, over their lifetime, $10 million per any one project.
Ms. Sellers, were you saying that they gave you a bucket of money
Yes,
and you decided where to spend it?
yes.
And it wasn't project-based?
It wasn't project.
So I don't know when that changed. We'll go back and look at it, but that's not the way it is now.
I was on the board
That
when
might
it
have something to
changed.
do, there was a time in the past
was
where
on
we
the
allowed
committee.
citywide
The first
projects where they would just say sidewalks, and we give you the money. But the problem we have with that is then it would never not be a priority one because it would never end. So what we do now is say, if you have a citywide project, tell us the projects.
Yes, now
And
it's
and
project-based.
yes, tell us the projects, because I don't want you to come back next year, add 5 projects, I'm a priority one again. The next time, come add 2 more projects and say, hey, I'm a priority one again, and be the priority every single time. So we changed the policy to say, if you ask for a citywide or townwide project, you have to list the projects. And when you're done, if you need more money for those projects, great. But when you're done with those projects, your allocation is done.
Well, so it gave more flexibility locality because this is also one where, like, Smart Scale has some limitations on the use of proffer money. And so the county could use proffers, they could use their local match, and they could use revenue sharing to go and do a sidewalk. And so there were a lot of different things that a locality could use. And so what was $10 million of the locality's money now became potentially $30 million that you could bring to bear. And so I'm looking at this and just knowing that in Fredericksburg District, Stafford, we put up the 10 million, and Spotsylvania put up the 10 million. And with the city manager coming from Stafford, I would bet and assume that Tim Baruti would recommend to the city council to put up the 10 million at least. So that would be at least 20 million on the that should be for Fredericksburg under the previous definition. So that's my curiosity is, has the way we've changed the definition to be project-based impact the utility of this program?
It has spread the funding out to more, it has provided the opportunity for more localities to get funding. When we had the old process where you could just, even if it was over $10 million, you were getting there's like 9 localities that were constantly putting in more than $10 million, more than $10 million. And at a $100 million program, and they were priority ones because they always had the priority two, they were eating up all the money. So 9 localities put in $10 million of priority one, there's 9 localities getting $90 million. I've only got 10 left for everybody else in the state. So that's why we changed the policy to try and more equitably spread the money out to the smaller localities that just have some rural additions or unpaved roads or whatever it might be, because they were always priority twos. They were never priority ones, because they're getting enough to finish that one project. So we're trying to make it work for everybody. So some of the big localities would have 40, 50, $60 million revenue sharing projects. This is before the $10 million cap. They kept coming back every year for more money, and they were eating up all the money.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Thank you, Mr. Tully.
Thank you.
Keep going. You haven't finished. You got a slide left for us.
Oh, sorry about that. So we
Actually,
will come back.
you have 2 slides left.
Should have, so you saw this, very popular program. The projects will be added to the SYP for your approval next month. And that's it.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Dudley.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Director, Madam Director.
You have my normal monthly update in your folder. I want to draw your attention to one specific thing. We have report every month on transit ridership, and we had a nice conversation with the subcommittee this morning about where we are, and so I wanted to highlight that for the full board. We look year over year at a certain month. We're reporting for the month of February right now. It gives us a chance to validate data before we present it to you. So overall, statewide, this is not including WMATA and VRE, we are 15% over the same month last year. And that is representing over 90% of the pre-pandemic level statewide. And we have many systems that are over pre-pandemic level. So we're going to start losing that pre-pandemic tag because we're pretty much back there when you look at on a statewide basis. For Metro. Metro in February, and their numbers for March and April are looking even better, but I'm going to give you a few data points for February. 50% reduction in fare evasion year over year, 19% reduction in crime year over year, and a 33% increase in trips made by federal employees, which is a good indicator that the Metro rail system, from a ridership perspective, is heading in a good direction. Their ridership overall for February was up 37% year over year. VRE continues a slow recovery, but a steady recovery. Their ridership was up 16% year over year. Our Virginia Breeze intercity bus system was up 20% year over year. And Amtrak Virginia set yet another ridership record for the month of February. I will add, they caveat their data and said it was a leap year, so we had an extra day, but we would have set a new record anyway. So ridership and trends all heading in the right direction. There's a lot of good information about work that our team has been doing since last month to partner with our agencies across the Commonwealth that's in the report. And if I may, since this is my last board meeting, I was thinking this morning as Russ stood at the podium for a very long time, that my first time standing at the podium was 2007, presenting the urban system policy, which this board rescinded, I think, in the policy cleanup a few months ago. So I've stood at the podium a long time, many times, for a long time since then. I was very grateful not to be Russ today with all of his presentations, but I never in a million years thought I would sit at the table. And so it's been a good couple of years, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Secretary, and look forward to what comes next. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to defer my comments to next month,
Perfect.
so we'll make it even speedier.
So I get to make some comments. I love it. Mr. Brule was standing there 2007, that's 17 years ago, ma'am. It must have been about 6. And she should have been the one to tell us what's changed in the policy since she was all involved in it back in those days. But yeah, we're going to invite you back for a little fun, if you will join us over the summer at some point. You know, I've made a lot of comments about Jennifer over the years, and certainly in the last few months. She's been an incredible servant of the Commonwealth. She's been a trailblazing leader, and she's been a consummate professional in her work. And so it's sad to see her go. But I'm really happy for her because she's really excited. And she's got a new chapter in her life. She's going to turn the page. She's going to do something fun for a few months, I hope. That's her plan. And then get back on the treadmill doing something that's exciting. And I'm sure we'll see her around, if you will. But we're going to get you back and have a little bit more fun with you, if you'll allow us and talk nice about you some more. But it's been a real pleasure. As you know, I came on this board 14 years ago, I think. Excuse me. Well, that's his problem. That's his problem. I would note his hair is getting more gray too, I'm just saying. Sorry, Mr. Commissioner. Mine's all the way gone, so. You know, I joined the board 14 years ago and got to know Jennifer there, and the reason that she's sitting at the table is because of her competency in what she's done. And so that says it all. So I want to add my thanks to the governors for your service, and we'll have some more party time about it later when at an appropriate time over the summer. Ms. Hines.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Brule, we have some thoughts from us to share with you. You don't have to do it now, but I think I speak for all of my colleagues when we say how grateful we are for the leadership and the explanations that you have given us. And I am going to probably break every rule there is. But in my family, we have beginnings and endings a particular way, and so I'm going to do it for you. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of her hand. Thank you.
Now, I think we need a song as a response, Mr. Brule. Just saying.
I'm going to do you all a favor and not do that.
Thank you, Ms. Hines.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Well, thank you. I'm going to adjourn the workshop meeting with that song in my head. Very nicely done, ma'am.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
I did tell you I was a musician, so.
Well, since we're not in session right now, I was in the, I grew up in the chorus and the All City Board scores and All City chorus, and I love people that sing, and it was delightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call to order the action meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board on May 14th. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here to make public comment? Anybody want to say anything?
Not after that.
All right. Yeah, right. Anybody want to sing? Hearing no public comment, I would ask for approval of the minutes. The minutes have been distributed.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Yates, and there's a second by Dr. Smoot. Are there any comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, Mr. Hetzel. Thank you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm very well, Mr.
Welcome.
Secretary. Happy to be here at the Russ Dudley Show this morning.
I think it's going to be the Commissioner Hines show after that performance.
And if I would take a second to extend greetings to Mr. Brule and wish her well in retirement. We worked together for many years here at the department, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I bring before you a very important project in the Hampton Roads District. This involves a limited access control change request for Phase 1 of the air terminal interchange on the north side of the intermodal connector in Norfolk between I-564 and Hampton Boulevard. The project is providing access and traffic circulation improvements along the western end of the intermodal connector near the Hampton Roads Boulevard, and specifically these improvements will allow two-way access from the local street network to the intermodal connector and provide increased access for the U.S. Navy facility there. The project is supported by the Navy, the Port of Virginia, and the City of Norfolk. It has approved environmental documentation, public involvement processes, and the access control changes have been endorsed by our chief engineer. With approval of these, we will continue to move the project along in its development and meet our advertisement schedule. I ask for the board's favorable dispensation.
Thank you, sir. We have a resolution. Do we have a motion? Mr. Stant moves. Is there a second? Mr. Folks seconds. I would note, Mr. Commissioner, as I read the brief, limited access control for I-564 was previously established on October 4, 1956. When did we build 564, sir? I think it was like 1990 or something, 1980 something. It hadn't been there that long. I can tell you, it certainly wasn't there in 1956.
We connected into the air terminal, or the air terminal facility tied into 564, which was built back in 56.
In the 564.
Into 564. And that required a limited access break at that point in time.
Say so. If you're telling me that Interstate 564 was going by Chambers Field in 1956,
Oh, that's when it was designed.
you and I are going to have to go down there and have a chat, because I can assure you it did not. I understand that's the point. It was designed in 1956, right? It didn't happen till probably 25 years later, 20 years. When was 564 built?
I don't have the answer.
I can tell you it wasn't in 1956. I digress. We have a motion, we have a second. Are there any comments or questions?
Only comment
Stamp.
is that, as originally envisioned, this road was going to be terribly expensive. And due to the efforts of Steve and his staff, they cut $100 million off the price of this.
Yeah, it was sort of a swap.
It was a swap. I mean, the Navy gave us something some years ago, and we agreed.
We agreed to do it.
We agreed to do this, but the way it was originally designed was going to cost a bloody fortune, and they brought it in at 1/5 of the price. So a
Here,
great
here.
job by Steve and his staff.
Here, here. Good work. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dudley, it's back to you. The show continues.
All right, so today I have one resolution for your consideration. This is an economic development access allocation for Botetourt County. And the board was provided an overview of the request during last month's workshop. The request is for $833,646, $700,000 of that unmatched and $133,646 matched for the construction of an economic development access road to serve Lot 3 of Botetourt Center at Greenfield. The construction will extend International Parkway about 1,100 feet. The locality will administer the project and also be required to provide a financial surety for the allocation amount, and then document $4,168,230 of capital investment before the surety will be released. The Local Assistance Division supports this project allocation and recommends the board approve the allocation.
Any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr.
I have
Smoot?
been down and looked at this project and met with the county, and this continues to be a very successful area of economic development, and I'm pleased to move the approval.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. Is there a second? Ms. Linda Green seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 3. Mr. Todd, how are you, sir? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Mr. Secretary, members of the board, I have one resolution for you today that covers 3 projects. We have Sharp Tech USA, who's requested $450,000 in Accomack County, Queen City Logistics, that's requested $301,000 in Stanton, and Norfolk Terminals, that has requested $560,000 in the city of Norfolk. Each of these projects has exceeded the minimum application scoring for our recommendation, so I would recommend approval.
Does anybody want to break any of this apart? Everybody good with them together?
Move approval, sir.
Mr. Stan makes a motion. Mr. Davis seconds with Mr. Merrill's support. Thank you, sir. Are there any comments or questions?
Just one comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
I was surprised at how low the amount was that had been requested by the Stanton project, only $300,000 based upon what they're spending. So it just shows.
Same thing in Norfolk. Huge investment by the private people. And they've taken over the entire Ford plant.
I know, it's fantastic, which is amazing. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, Mr. Todd. Mr. Prezioso. Maintenance Division, action on commemorative naming at the request of Campbell County of the bridge on northbound US Route 29 over 626, Lynch Road in Campbell County, located within the Lynchburg District, is the Senior Airman Ricky L. Merritt Bridge. Sir.
Good morning, sir. So we have one resolution for your consideration today, the commemorative naming of this roadway. Campbell County Board of Supervisors approved a resolution in March of this year to honor the life and service and ultimate sacrifice of Senior Airman Merritt. According to that resolution, Mr. Merritt was a graduate of Alta Vista High School, where he was a star athlete in both football and track. He was noted for his respectful, kindness, and generous demeanor. And unfortunately, his life was cut short in August of 1996 when the Air Force C-130 he was in crashed. It took his life as well as that of 8 other crewmen. We ask for your consideration of this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Ms. Green makes the motion, Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? Please rise if you vote in the affirmative. Join me. Thank you very much. Ms. Pryor, good morning. Welcome.
Morning, thank you.
Hope you're well. Item number 5, action on fiscal years 24 through 29, 6-year improvement program transfers for March 16th through April 19th. Ma'am.
Thank you. You have before you the list of standard monthly transfers for your approval and for your information, and I recommend your approval.
Any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Kaspertz moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Hines seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 6, action on smart scale project budget increase for widen East Eldon Street from Monroe Street to Fairfax County Parkway in the town of Herndon, located within the Northern Virginia District. Ms. Pryor, thank you.
Thank you. You will recall I briefed the board on this smart scale budget increase last month. There were delays with this project associated with an inability to move forward with the utility relocation into a duck bank. And so the resulting $15 million shortfall is being covered by the locality's application for revenue sharing money as well as regional surface transportation funding through the MPO. And the request before you is to approve $4.5 million in district grant funding for the project. And I recommend your approval.
Moved.
Ms. Hines makes the motion. Mr. Kaspertz seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Item number 7, action on smart scale project budget increase for intersection improvements at US 58 and Robinson Ferry Road in Brunswick County, located within the Richmond District.
Thank you. You'll recall I also briefed the board on this project last month. There were some additional costs associated with design refinements needed to make sure that all of the movements at the intersection functioned properly. The cost increase is $1.4 million, and it's recommended to be covered with district grant funds, and I recommend your approval.
Mr. Davis.
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Merrill seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have one item of new business, and that is to let you know that the I-564 interstate was built in the mid-'70s, Mr. Bridge. which I remember well because I was coming out of high school, going into college. You were still in kindergarten. Mr. Stant.
Have we any idea where this meeting's going to take place next month?
Where? It's on the agenda. It's here.
It's here?
Yeah. Yeah, it should be on the calendar.
The main meeting is on Monday, is that correct? The main meeting in June is on Monday. It's different, that's. Sorry.
Ms. Hines, I have to tell you, I'm not sure, but Ms. Mathis here will let me know.
In June, we are scheduled right now to have a 2-day meeting. It's Monday, Tuesday, because that Wednesday is a state holiday. So currently, we have action meetings scheduled for Tuesday, June 18th.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I'm just not focused on it. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And, yes, sir. Mr. Yates.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate the agency. I think VDOT orange would be a much better color for the roof if you decide you want to paint that.
We will take that under advisement. Yeah, that was announced, you saw it in the press this morning and maybe last night. Something that's been in the works for a while. The commissioner did a fantastic job. And he really saved us a lot of money on this deal. So I would just tell you as just an aside, that the money that was saved was profound. And we had a plan where we had a piece of land out in Henrico and we were going to go build our new building out there. That plan had been under works for a number of years. We were sort of getting ready to go when we got here. And we slowed down and looked at other options. The price of construction versus the price of buying an existing building is ridiculously out of sync. And so we were able to purchase the building as was reported for in the $30 million range. We would have spent $100 million more if we'd gone the other place and built the same thing, basically. This was a building that's signature, it's beautiful, it's not very far away. We can basically sort of move in with some work to be done, but it's outstanding space. I'll let the commissioner speak to that, but the answer is no.
So Ms. Hines in the board, no, the headquarters is still going to remain in the downtown on Capitol Square. We'll continue to own the old highway building where we're at, as well as the hospital building next door. The only building that we're going to vacate is the annex building, the high-rise building next door. So the engineering staff will be relocated to the new building about this time next year. They are leasing back the facility at this point, and then we'll do some minor renovations to be able to ready that for the staff. The executive team will remain here in this building. We're renovating the 4th floor and anticipate being in that, occupying that space before the end of the year.
Questions on that? Exciting. When do we move, Mr. Commissioner? End of?
Anticipate the move this time next year.
It's a great spot, and well done on your part, sir. So with that, yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
Who'd be the best person? I happened to drive down last evening and passed 2 very large construction sites, and I'd like to share some observations. I was surprised and disappointed at some of the safety measures that I saw both on.
Both of us, please. Love to hear about it. Beverly Carwile on the back. She's been really helpful getting us all squared away on our iPads. I want to thank you for that, ma'am. All that you've done. And I'm not going to ask her to do it again, but I know your birthday's tomorrow. So I wanted to say happy birthday, and, oh, let's go ahead and do it.
Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Miss Beverly. Happy birthday to you. So we're all about song here. Happy birthday, ma'am, and thank you for all your help. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.